My wife said, "Move your family out, mine is higher status." I kicked her out of my mother's house, filed for divorce, and then her secret lover called me, begging to take her back. I never thought marriage would come down to this kind of ugly, pride-driven battle, but here we are. I'm 34 years old, and I've been married to my wife for 4 years. In the beginning, things felt normal, maybe even happy. We had our fair share of small disagreements, but nothing that felt out of the ordinary. I honestly believed we were building something steady together. But over the last few months, things started to shift. It wasn't a sudden explosion. It was little changes in her attitude, small remarks she'd make about my family, subtle things I brushed off at first. At the time, I told myself, maybe she's stressed, maybe she just needs some space. But in hindsight, those were red flags I should have paid closer attention to. I live in a multigenerational home. My mother, my father, and one of my close relatives live with me. This isn't new. It's always been the arrangement. From the very beginning, my wife knew about it. The deed of the house is in my mother's name. I was upfront about that before we ever got married. And for years, it was fine. We shared meals, celebrated birthdays, and even had moments that felt like real family bonding. That's why what happened still feels surreal to me. One evening, her relatives came over to visit. Nothing unusual, right? Families visit each other. I thought it was just going to be a normal evening with some polite conversation and maybe dinner. But almost as soon as they walked in, I noticed something different about her. She was acting tense. She avoided eye contact with my parents, gave short answers to their greetings, and had this look on her face like she was embarrassed by their presence. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I stayed quiet. But then she pulled me aside, away from everyone else, and that's when everything started unraveling. She looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You need to move your family out of the house while my family is here." At first, I thought I misheard her. Move my family? Out of their own home? Just because her relatives came to visit? I couldn't wrap my head around it. So, I asked her directly, "Why would that be a problem? They live here. This is their home too." Her response is something I'll never forget. She didn't hesitate. She didn't soften her words. She just said it coldly. "My family is different. Don't compare them to your family. My family is higher status than yours." I swear, those words landed like a punch to the chest. It wasn't just a small insult. It was a clear window into how she really viewed me and my family. It wasn't about temporary discomfort or even some minor cultural clash. It was pride. It was arrogance. And it cut deeper than I can explain. I remember standing there, trying to process what she had just said. All the little comments she'd made in the past about how her family did things better suddenly clicked into place. It wasn't just light teasing. She actually believed it. She thought her family was above mine. I tried to stay calm. I told her, "This is my home. My family lives here. They're not going anywhere. If it's such a problem for you, maybe you and your family should leave instead." The look on her face shifted instantly. Shock, then anger. Her eyes narrowed, and her jaw tightened. She muttered something under her breath, but I could feel the storm building. She wasn't used to me pushing back like that. Inside, I was battling a mix of emotions, hurt, disbelief, and this heavy weight of realization that the woman I had married didn't just dislike my family, she disrespected them. And by extension, she disrespected me. That night became the beginning of the unraveling. I didn't fully know it then, but that one conversation, those few sentences, set everything else in motion. It exposed the truth I had been avoiding for too long. My wife wasn't just unhappy, she was ashamed of the life we shared. And once you see that kind of truth, you can't unsee it. Her words that night kept echoing in my head. "My family is higher status than yours." I tried to shake it off, but the truth is, once you hear something like that from your spouse, you can't unhear it. I went back into the living room and sat quietly, watching her relatives chat with each other while my parents stayed polite and welcoming, completely unaware of what had just been said to me. I kept replaying the conversation, weighing whether I had misunderstood her tone, or maybe she didn't mean it the way it came out. But the look on her face had been too sharp, too deliberate. Later that evening, when her family had finally left, I brought it up again. I told her calmly, "What you said earlier about my family. Do you really mean that?" She crossed her arms and didn't hesitate. "Yes, I mean it. Don't compare my family to yours. It's embarrassing. My relatives shouldn't have to sit in the same house as your parents." I can't explain the mixture of emotions that went through me. Shock, hurt, and this deep sense of betrayal. My parents had never disrespected her. They treated her like their own daughter from the very beginning. And here she was, looking me dead in the eye and saying they weren't good enough. I told her, as evenly as I could, "This is my home. My family lives here, and they're not going anywhere. If that's such a problem for you, maybe you and your family should be the ones to leave." That's when everything exploded. Her face flushed bright red. Her voice shot up in volume almost instantly. "This is my house too," she screamed. You don't get to talk to me like that. But she was wrong. Legally, this house is in my mother's name. She knew that from the start. I reminded her of that fact, and the moment I did, her entire demeanor shifted from anger to outright rage. Her eyes welled up, not with sadness, but with fury. She was clenching her fists like she was ready to strike me. For a moment, I just stared at her, completely stunned at how far things had escalated. This wasn't just a marital spat anymore. This was raw disrespect, boiling over into something I couldn't tolerate. I took a deep breath and said, "Enough. I can't do this anymore. If you think so little of me and my family, if you think you're better than us, then it's over. Leave my house. I want a divorce." She froze for a second, like she couldn't believe I'd said it. Then came the screaming. She shouted at me, called me ungrateful, accused me of humiliating her in her own home. She cried, she yelled, she even tried to grab me at one point. But I stood firm. I wasn't going to let her intimidation tactics or her tears erase the truth of what she had said. This isn't about winning or losing, I told her. It's about respect. And you've made it clear you don't respect me or my family. I'm not living like this anymore. That's when I physically opened the door and told her to leave. She resisted at first, kept screaming, but I stood my ground. Eventually, she stormed out, still shouting as she went. I closed the door behind her, locked it, and sat down in silence. It was one of the hardest moments of my life, pushing my own wife out of the house. But in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: clarity. After she left, my phone started buzzing nonstop. Texts, missed calls. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I blocked her number. For the first time, I wasn't second-guessing myself. I wasn't trying to justify her behavior or make excuses for her pride. I just knew it was over. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and realized how final my decision had been. There was no going back. And strangely, I didn't feel regret. I felt relief. The night after I told her it was over was far from peaceful. I thought once she stormed out, there would finally be some silence, some space for me to process what had just happened. But I underestimated how far she, and her family, would go. Not long after she left, my phone started buzzing. Her number at first, but since I had already blocked her, the calls stopped showing. Then came her mother. Call after call. I didn't answer a single one. There was nothing to say. I wasn't interested in being yelled at, manipulated, or guilt-tripped into changing my decision. Every call that came through, I just let it ring. My phone felt like it weighed 10 pounds in my pocket. Hours later, just as I thought the chaos was winding down, she showed up at the front gate with her relatives. I could hear her shouting from outside. "You'll face consequences for this. You'll regret what you've done." I didn't open the door. I just stood inside, listening. My father came out of his room and asked if he should intervene, but I shook my head. The last thing I wanted was for this to turn into some ugly public scene. Instead, I called out through the door, my voice steady. "Fine. Do whatever you want. Go ahead." And then I laughed, not because it was funny, but because her threats felt hollow. She could scream all she wanted. I wasn't changing my mind. Eventually, they left, still muttering about how I'd ruined everything. I locked the door, sat back down, and finally called my lawyer. It was late, but I needed to get the process started as soon as possible. Divorce wasn't just an idea in my head anymore. It was action. I thought that would be the end of it for the night. I thought I could finally rest. But a few hours later, just when the house was quiet and my parents had gone to bed, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I would have ignored it, but something told me to pick up. "Hello." I answered, my voice low. What I heard on the other end stopped me in my tracks. It wasn't her mother. It wasn't her. It was a man's voice. He hesitated for a second, then said, "Please, don't leave her. She's crying. She says she can't live without you. Don't go through with the divorce." For a moment, I didn't understand. Who was this man? Why was he speaking on her behalf? So I asked directly, "Who are you?" Silence. Then, almost like he slipped up, he admitted, "I'm her friend. Her close friend. She told me everything." And that's when it all clicked. The disrespect, the arrogance, her sudden obsession with status. It wasn't just about pride, it was about betrayal. She hadn't been treating me like her husband because she already had someone else in her life. I could feel my jaw tighten, but my voice stayed calm. "If you're really her friend, then you can tell her this for me. I'm done. I want a divorce. There's nothing left to talk about." Before he could respond, I hung up. The silence after that call was different. Heavy. Final. I sat there in the dark, the glow of my phone screen still lighting up my hand, and realized the truth. My marriage hadn't just died tonight. It had been dying slowly, piece by piece, long before this confrontation ever happened. Tonight just revealed the reality I had been too blind, or too hopeful, to see. I wasn't angry in that moment. I wasn't even sad. What I felt was clarity. Like I had finally stopped lying to myself about who she really was, and what our marriage had become. The woman I thought I married, the woman I once trusted, was gone, and the person left in her place wasn't someone I could build a life with. So I set my phone down, took a deep breath, and decided this was the end. No more excuses. No more second chances. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. When the sun came up the next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold long before I finished it. My parents were quiet, letting me have space, but I could see the worry in their eyes. They didn't need to say anything. I already knew they were hurting for me. As I sat there replaying everything, I realized how surreal it all felt. In the US, people often talk about marriages falling apart because of money problems, infidelity, or differences in values. And sure, in my case, there had been infidelity too, but what had really broken us wasn't just another man. It was something deeper. It was pride and arrogance. The more I thought about it, the more the pieces fit together. Every time she'd made a little joke about how her family did things better. Every side comment about how my parents weren't refined enough. Every sigh when my mom offered her food or when my dad asked her to join us for a family outing. At the time, I brushed those things off as small irritations. I didn't want to believe they meant anything. But now I could see clearly. She had never truly respected my family. And if she couldn't respect them, then she didn't really respect me either. I kept hearing her voice in my head. Don't compare them to my family. My family is higher status. That sentence replayed like a broken record. It wasn't just insulting. It showed me exactly where I stood in her eyes. I wasn't her partner. I was someone she thought she could control, someone she thought she could mold into her version of respectable by pushing my family out of the picture. And here's the truth that hurt the most. I had invested years into this marriage. I believed in us. I thought love was enough to bridge the gaps between us. I thought compromise and patience would carry us through. But I was wrong. Love doesn't survive without respect. That realization stung, but at the same time, it gave me a strange kind of relief. I had spent so long doubting myself, wondering if I was overreacting, if maybe I was being too sensitive about the way she spoke about my family. Now, there was no doubt. The line had been crossed, and it couldn't be undone. It's hard to explain, but in that moment, I felt two emotions at once: grief and freedom. Grief, because I was watching the death of something I had believed in. I was facing the fact that the person I thought was my life partner didn't actually value me the way I valued her. That's a painful thing to admit to yourself. But freedom, because I finally stood up for myself and my family. I finally drew the line and said, no more. As the day went on, I kept thinking about how she had screamed, how she had tried to fight me when I told her it was over. And then the call from that other man, the so-called friend, who had begged me to take her back. That alone told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't just arrogant. She wasn't just obsessed with status. She had betrayed me. And honestly, that combination, disrespect and betrayal, was something I couldn't come back from. Sitting there at the table, I felt the weight of the years I had spent trying to hold this marriage together. And for the first time, I admitted to myself that I had stayed longer than I should have. Yes, it hurt. Divorce is never easy. But I also felt a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in a long time. I stood up for my family. I protected my home. I refused to let someone treat the people I love like they were disposable. And that gave me peace. The first few days after I told her to leave were strangely quiet. I expected chaos, constant phone calls, or even her showing up at the house again. But instead, there was silence. At first, I thought maybe she had accepted it. Maybe she realized how final my decision was. But silence doesn't always mean peace. By the end of the week, the calls started again, not from her directly, but from different numbers. I didn't answer most of them, but when I finally picked up one late evening, it was her voice on the other end. She wasn't screaming this time. She wasn't angry. She was soft, almost pitiful. I made a mistake, she said. I didn't mean what I said about your family. Please, just give me one more chance. It might have sounded convincing to anyone else, but I knew her too well. There was something missing in her tone. It wasn't love. It wasn't genuine regret. It was fear. She had always been comfortable in this house. She never worried about bills. She never worried about stability. Everything was taken care of, by me, by my parents, by the security of knowing she had a place here. And now that it was slipping through her fingers, she suddenly wanted to fix things. But I couldn't ignore the fact that just a few nights earlier, she had been screaming about how my family wasn't good enough. She hadn't changed her mind overnight. What changed was her circumstances. I told her calmly, you didn't make a mistake in the heat of the moment. You said what you truly feel. That's not something you can take back. I'm not going to pretend like it didn't happen. There was silence on the other end for a long time. Then she said quietly, you'll regret this. You think you can just throw me out and move on, but you'll see. And with that, she hung up. The next day, her mother called me again, but this time, it wasn't yelling. It was pleading. She's crying nonstop. She says you misunderstood her. Please, don't go through with this divorce. I listened, but I didn't respond. Because I hadn't misunderstood anything. I had seen the truth with my own eyes, heard it in her own words, and even gotten confirmation from her so-called friend. The truth was, she wasn't crying because she lost me. She was crying because she lost the security she thought she would always have. And then it hit me. She had assumed I would never leave. She had assumed she could say whatever she wanted, treat my family however she wanted, and I would still stay, because that's what a husband does. She thought I'd never walk away. But she was wrong. That night, I lay awake thinking about all the ways she had taken advantage of that assumption. The way she dismissed my family's kindness. The way she carried herself like she was above us all. The way she thought marriage was some guarantee of comfort, no matter how she behaved. It made me realize something important. Regret doesn't always come from love. Sometimes it comes from fear of losing the benefits of a relationship. And that kind of regret doesn't mean anything. So, when she tried again a few days later, this time showing up at the gate with tears in her eyes, I didn't open the door. She shouted, begged, even said she didn't care about status anymore, that she just wanted me back. But the thing about respect is, once it's gone, it doesn't come back. I turned away, closed the blinds, and let her stand out there. Inside, my chest felt heavy, but not because I doubted myself. It was heavy because I finally understood how little our marriage had actually been built on. She hadn't loved me the way I thought. She had loved the comfort, the home, the idea of being taken care of. And once that was gone, she had nothing left to hold on to. After she showed up crying at the gate and I turned her away, things started to spiral. She must have realized that her tears alone weren't going to change my mind, because her approach shifted almost overnight. The next morning, I woke up to a string of long messages from an unknown number. It was her, of course. The first ones read like apologies, paragraphs about how she was under pressure from her family, how she didn't mean the things she said, how she just wanted us to start fresh. I read them, but didn't respond. I knew where they were coming from. By the afternoon, the tone had shifted. If you go through with this divorce, I'll make sure everyone knows you threw me out like I was nothing, one message read. Another said, you think your family will protect you, but they'll suffer too. There it was, the real her, beneath the fake regret and the forced apologies. When kindness didn't work, she fell back on threats. I sat there looking at my phone, and for the first time in days, I almost laughed. Not because any of it was funny, but because the cycle was so predictable. She couldn't accept the reality that I wasn't bending anymore. Later that evening, her mother called again. This time, she tried a different angle. Son, don't do this. Marriage is about patience. You can't throw everything away because of one argument. I almost respected the attempt, but this wasn't one argument. This was years of small cuts that had built up to one big wound. I told her calmly, it's not one argument. It's disrespect, over and over. I won't live like that. She didn't know what to say after that. She just sighed and hung up. But her daughter wasn't done. That night, I got another call, this time from her again, her voice shaky and uneven. You think you're strong now, she said. But when I'm gone, you'll regret it. You'll see what life is without me. I could hear the edge in her tone. It wasn't sadness. It was manipulation. She wanted me to feel guilty, to imagine myself as the one who failed, to second-guess everything. But instead of anger, I just felt tired. Exhausted, really. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply said, I've already seen what life with you is like. And that's enough. I'm moving on. Then I hung up. The next day, I met with my lawyer to start finalizing the paperwork. Sitting in that office, going over signatures and documents, I felt a strange mix of emotions. It wasn't joy, exactly, but it was relief. Relief that I was finally taking control, that I was putting an end to the chaos instead of letting it drag on. And while the legal side was moving forward, her attempts kept coming. Some days it was pleading. Please, just one more chance. Other days it was angry. You'll regret this for the rest of your life. But none of it worked. What she didn't understand was that my decision wasn't about winning an argument. It wasn't about pride. It was about dignity, for myself, for my family, for the life I wanted to live. Once that line was crossed, there was no turning back. I noticed something else too. The more I refused to engage, the more her tone shifted toward panic. It was like she couldn't believe I wasn't falling for the cycle anymore. For years, maybe she thought she could say or do whatever she wanted, and I'd still be there. But now, for the first time, she realized I wouldn't. And that realization was eating her alive. By the end of that week, the messages slowed. The calls became less frequent. Maybe she finally saw the truth, that I wasn't coming back, no matter how many tears, threats, or apologies she threw my way. For me, that was the final confirmation I needed. I wasn't just walking away from her. I was walking toward a life where respect mattered, where love wasn't measured by status or pride, but by real partnership. The paperwork was in motion. The chapter was closing, and all that was left now was moving forward. The day I signed the final set of papers, I walked out of my lawyer's office and felt like a weight had lifted off my shoulders. It wasn't joy. It was something quieter, steadier. A kind of peace that comes when you finally close a door you've been staring at for far too long. My phone stayed quiet that day. No more pleading messages, no more threats, no more desperate attempts to guilt me into changing my mind. For the first time in weeks, there was silence. Real silence. And I realized how much I had missed that. She and her family can try whatever they want. Threats, begging, manipulation, but it doesn't matter anymore. My path is clear now. The divorce is underway, and I have no reason to look back. As I sat down with my parents that evening, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. They had been through all of this with me, standing quietly by my side, never once pressuring me, but always supporting me. When I thought about how she wanted me to push them aside, to act like they weren't good enough for her standards, it only strengthened my decision. Marriage is supposed to bring families together, not tear them apart. The moment your spouse demands you choose between them and your family, that's not love, it's control. And control has no place in a marriage. Looking back, I don't regret ending it. I regret staying as long as I did with someone who never truly respected me or my family. I regret the years I invested in trying to make something work that was already broken beneath the surface. But walking away, that was the best decision I could have made. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: respect is the foundation of love. Without it, you can have passion, attraction, even years of shared experiences, but it won't hold. Eventually, the cracks will show. And when they do, you have to ask yourself, is this really the life I want to keep living? For me, the answer was no. Now, I'm moving forward. I don't know what the future looks like yet, but I know what it won't include. Being treated like my family is disposable, or being made to feel like I'm somehow less because of where I come from. I'm 34, and I thought by now I'd be building a family with someone who stood by my side through thick and thin. Instead, I'm starting over. And strangely, I'm okay with that. Starting over is better than staying trapped in a life where you're never truly valued. To anyone reading this who's in a relationship where your partner constantly disrespects your family, don't ignore the warning signs. Don't convince yourself it's just a phase, or that love will magically fix it. Love doesn't erase disrespect. And once you lose respect, you lose everything. If your partner believes their family is superior to yours and expects you to push your loved ones aside just to appease them, ask yourself, is that really the kind of marriage you want? I didn't. And I'm glad I finally had the strength to walk away. I know some people will say I was too harsh, or that I should have tried harder to make it work. But honestly, how do you make things work with someone who doesn't see your family as equals? How do you build a future with someone who secretly believes they're above you? You don't. So I chose myself. I chose my family. And I chose peace. Now, I want to hear from others. If you were in my shoes, if your spouse demanded you push your family aside and admitted they thought their family was higher status, what would you do? Would you fight to save the marriage, or would you walk away like I did? I appreciate you watching till the end. Hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more content.